Good evening, everybody. So today's live is on a very different day. It's usually a Wednesday. Today's Friday. Had some internet connection problems where the whole network was down, so couldn't do a live, and that's why I'm here on a Friday. So I'm not going to take up too much of your time because I know you've got other stuff to do on a Friday, but most people usually have. I'm sure you have too. So a question that I was asked, uh, well, I've been asked a few times, in fact, is what advice would I give to young property investors or those who are people who are young and looking to get into property? So, generally speaking, how most people's lives run or how people think their life will run is they go to school, then some end up going to university, then they end up buying a house, less so nowadays than when it used to be when I was young or younger. They then get married, have kids, and then retire. Not all in that particular order, by the way. Some people do things differently. Some people have kids before they get married and all sorts, but uh, everybody's different, I guess. But today, conventionally, you don't have to do things in that order. Do you have to go to university? Well, I'm not going to cover that in too much detail today. I've got my own opinion on that, by the way. And my answer is no, you don't have to go to university at all. I'm not even sure if it's worth the investment, apart from obviously if you're looking to go into a certain discipline like being a dentist or a doctor, or if you want to become a solicitor, for example, you may have to go to university. But generally speaking, are there merits to go to university? Not for everybody, and it doesn't work for everybody either. But that's not the purpose of this particular live. It's if you're young and you're looking to get into property, what are some of the things that I think you ought to be doing? And the first one, I think, very importantly, is you've got to make short-term sacrifices. So before I get onto that, I bought my first property at the tender age of 23, and back in those days, which is quite a while ago now, I thought I was starting off quite young. But today, I see people who are 18, 19 buying properties, and they're starting off even younger. My eldest son's 14, and he's pretty much chomping at the bit, saying, "Dad, when can I do my first property deal with you?" So you may have seen some of the stuff I'm doing in Bicker, Boston, and he wants to go out there regularly with me on the weekends, see what's going on. He pays a lot of attention, by the way, so I know he's interested, and it's not far away now that I will do my first flip with him, and he's quite excited about that. And the reason I'm doing that with him is because he's showing interest, and because he's showing interest, I'm happy to get him involved. So if you have any questions, by the way, feel free to ask them. I'm more than happy to answer them for you. As always, they don't have to be on property. They can be on property tax, on business, or anything else that you think I may be able to help you with. So short-term sacrifices is cutting out those non-essential expenditure. So do you really need a new pair of trainers? Do you really have to go out this weekend? Do you really need to order another takeaway? And the answer usually is no. So if you're young and enthusiastic, then be sharp on your finances and cut out those non-essential expenses and save that money to invest into property. Now, you don't need money to invest in property, and that's one thing I'm going to share with you a bit later on. But if you do in your mind feel you need to have some savings, then cut out those short, non-essential expenditure, make those sacrifices, because in the long term, that's going to benefit you a lot more, and you'll be glad you did, because most people, unfortunately, are spending money on things that they don't need to, including me, by the way. And if you're going to be disciplined, then those short kind of investments now are going to put you in good stead in the future. That's extremely important. Number two, get parent help from bank of mom and dad. So get your parents to help you out. Personally, I would, if I was investing, I'd invest with my parents. And I know people have a different stance here. Some would say don't involve family in business. Well, it totally depends. I do a lot of business with my family members, mainly my brothers, and I think it works absolutely fine. You just got to have very clear boundaries, which I do, which generally goes something like this: you give me your money, I'll invest it, you'll get a return. Until then, I don't really want to hear from you. Don't ask me for updates. Don't ask me what's going on, and I'm not going to bother you. And they quite like that arrangement, by the way. It works well for them too. So we've got very clear boundaries, and because there's inherent trust there, it works fine. For others, it might not work fine. So it just depends how you are. I've never had a falling out with my family members over money, and I hope and intend not to, by the way. but you never know what could happen. But if I were to invest with my parents, I would give them a share rather than just borrowing money from them. Because in my world, and again, this is my word, not yours. I don't. It feels a little bit like I'm being a freeloader, and that's not what I want to be or what I'd want to be. Leslie Pendenbury Bow says, I agree. So thank you very much for agreeing, and thank you for being on the live, Leslie. So bank up mom and dad is very helpful because they may have some savings or they may wish to make investments. So use them the best you can. Number 3, and this is more for the parents as for young people, is educate your children on becoming financially literate. I forgot to now how many people actually say to me, I'm not good with numbers. I don't understand accounts. I don't understand finances. And it's not their fault, by the way, because if you think about it, at school, are we taught those types of things? No, we're not. So the type of stuff we are taught at school, from algebra all the way down to the elements table at sciences, it doesn't help us in real life. Well, it doesn't help most of us, in fact. So you've got to learn to become financially literate. This isn't just about learning accounts, but it's about looking at the numbers that really matter in any particular business. So the kind of numbers that I track are KPIs, key performance indicators. Some people call them key predictive indicators, your key result areas. So the kind of areas in which you're looking to achieve your main results, your income generating tasks, so those tasks that generate you income, and then looking at the key metrics, whether it's cash in the bank, cash flow, debt, debtor days, return on income, return on capital employed, rental yield, internal rate of return. There's lots of different numbers, different metrics that property investors want to track. And I believe you ought to, as a parent, share those with your children to sharpen them up so that when they get to an age where they're ready to invest, they're ahead of the curve, because most people learn these things. And I can tell you from experience, I learned some of these things 10 years after being in business. And had I known them from the start, I don't know where I'd be. I think I've done pretty well overall. Maybe I'd have done better. I don't really think about that too much, but it took me a long while to learn those things. And I think if kids knew this stuff earlier, they'd be even sharper. Number 4, children who are looking to buy their first home, use any government grants and incentives like the first time buyer. I think that's a very good incentive. So make sure you make use of that before you start investing in property, buy a home for yourself. The biggest one that I would share with people, and one that has helped me a lot, is I started off very young, or pretty young, as an accountant and starting my own business. In fact, when I started that, people used to think I was too young to be an accountant, never mind have my own business. And because I started early, I had the opportunity to make a lot of mistakes. And if you watch some of my videos and hear me speak, I do talk about making mistakes, and I've made a ton of them, by the way, sometimes more than once. But I've learned from those mistakes. But the big benefit for me is because I started young, made those mistakes, I knew as I progressed, I can afford to make mistakes. So let's say somebody's 55, for the sake of argument, they're going to be more risk averse. If they make a mistake which costs them, let's say 50 grand or 100 grand, they've only got 5, 7, 10 years to make up for that mistake if they're looking to retire by the age of 60 or 65. And not to retire by 60 or 65, by the way, but if you were intending to, you've got less time to make up for it. If you're aged, let's say 18 or 20, and you make a 50 or 100 grand mistake, you've got another 35, 40 years, 45 years to make up for that mistake. So your margin of error is greater. Therefore, you can afford to take more risk. You can afford to be more bold, think outside the box. So therefore, the earlier you start, the more time you've got to do more stuff and be more bold than most of the people, because most people, generally speaking, in my experience of being in business for best part of 20 years now, sit on the fence and they think about stuff for way too long, whereas young people are more enthusiastic, more energetic. They think less, but they do more. And I think that's extremely important. Number 6, whether you go to university or not, I think it's incredibly important to educate yourself. Education in my books is twofold. The first one is you educate yourself by actually learning the theory of how business works, how property works. And the second one, which is the most important education, is in the doing. So it's actually the experience of getting stuff, because you can read as many books, go on as many courses you like, webinars, YouTube videos, be part of Facebook groups, read magazines, journals, articles. That's not going to change your life at all. It's when the rubber meets the road and you actually do the stuff, that's when you really learn stuff, and that's when things sink in and the penny drops. Aisha Mukhtar says, good advice. Thank you for sharing that, Aisha. Thank you for being here. MBA 007 says, very good point that young people aren't taught basic skills at school. Absolutely. That's a big bugbear of mine, MBA. And I'm hoping that will change at some point in the very near future as people start having an open mind. So education is extremely important. I think the parents who are listening here, involve your children early, especially if you're in property, which I assume you are, and if you're in business, because the stuff that they're going to learn younger is going to help them in the future. So quite often now, when I think about stuff that's stuck with me, most of it, believe it or not, is the stuff that I learned in my early years and as a teenager and a young man. That sticks with you over the long term, and it's those lessons I learned from my parents, grandparents, the people around me that I tend to adopt right now, which helped me a lot. So what people learn in their early years and the early days stays with them for a long time. Number 7 is one of the most powerful techniques I learned is what I call using other people's money in the world of property. It's called no money down. I've used this in property and I've also used it in business, and it works phenomenally well. So young people, when you're starting off, use the no money down, other people's money concept, and you'll be able to make a lot of money by not having your own money, but actually making things happen. So do not ever think you need money or a lot of money to get into property, and don't let that stop you. That's what people used to do 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago. Save up and have 5, 10, 15, 20 grand for a deposit and then buy a property. That's the old way of thinking. You don't need that right now. That's a thing of the past. So you need to move beyond that. Number 8, most importantly, is immerse yourself in property. You'll have heard the old adage and cliche kind of comment, which is the more you learn, the more you earn. I think that's incredibly important. It's you need to learn anything and everything about property. The conversations you should have without making you come across as dull and boring should be about property. The dreams that you have should be about property. Wherever you go, you should be thinking about property. When you're driving in the street, you should be looking at property, looking at opportunities, and everything in your life, okay, should link and connect to property. And you might find that boring, by the way, and think, oh, there's more to life than this property. That's a conversation for you to have with yourself. We've all got different opinions, but I started making a lot more progress when I immersed myself in all things property, and I improved my knowledge exponentially, and I improved and increased the number of deals that I do incredibly, because I became more confident and I had more contacts. And basically, like Napoleon Hill said, we become what we think about most. So because I was thinking about it most, and because I immersed myself, I ended up doing more of it. So there's a connection there for you. And number 9, and the last one, because I'm not going to go to 10, I just choose odd numbers randomly, is you're only young once. So enjoy it, and you don't want to get to the age where most people get to, I'm afraid, when they're 60, 65, 70 and older, and they say, I wish I'd have done that, I wish I'd done that, I wish I'd have done that. You don't want to be that person. You just want to crack on and say, I'm glad I did all those different things, to quote Zig Ziglar, and enjoy it and do the best that you can. MBA 007 says, my wife thought I was odd when I said the roof has really nice looking slating. Well, I don't think your wife's odd, MBA. I think it's the way that you said it that probably made you appear to be odd. So you just got to change how you say stuff. Remember, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And that, MBA, took me 40 years to understand. Well, I'm still learning that, by the way. But if you say it in the right way, I'm sure your wife will be very receptive, and in fact, she'll be glad. But if you said to her, that roof looks really nice, whatever your wife's name is, and I'm going to have a similar roof for our next buy-to-let property or our next flip, and that's going to make us 30 grand, and I'm going to buy you a £15,000 watch or take you for a holiday in the Maldives or wherever. You watch how interested she's going to be in you and your next property deal. So you want to try that MBA and come back and share it with us next time. That's my time up. Thank you very much for joining on a Friday evening. I appreciate your comments and your engagement. If you have any questions, send them to me in advance. I'll happily answer them for you on the next live, which will be next week. Until then, have a good weekend. Bye for now. Bye.